Maria was 79 years old when she met Lucas at the neighborhood market. He was 22 and worked as a bagger. She dropped a bag, and he helped pick up the groceries from the floor. Their eyes met, and something inexplicable happened. In the following weeks, Maria began to frequent the market more often than she needed to. Lucas always smiled when he saw her enter. They talked about simple things: his life studying at night, his dreams of becoming a teacher, her life as a widow for 10 years, her children who rarely visited, the loneliness that weighed on her empty afternoons. One day he asked if he could visit her. Maria felt her heart race as it hadn't in decades. She said yes. The visits began on Saturdays. Lucas brought inexpensive flowers from the market. They drank coffee and talked for hours. He told her about the books he read. She spoke of her youth, of stories that no one else wanted to hear. Gradually, the friendship transformed into something deeper, a tenderness that neither of them expected. Lucas held her hand, and Maria felt life return to her tired body. But they knew the world wouldn't understand. Maria's children found out when their sister-in-law saw them together in the park. The reaction was one of horror. They accused Lucas of being opportunistic, of taking advantage, of being after the inheritance. Maria tried to explain that there was no financial interest whatsoever, that Lucas paid for his own coffees, that he refused any help. But the children wouldn't listen. They forbade visits. They threatened Lucas. They said she was senile, incapable of making decisions. Lucas's mother also didn't accept it. She called her son crazy, lost. She said he was wasting his life with an old woman who would soon die. Lucas defended Maria, but the family pressure was overwhelming. For 2 weeks they didn't see each other. Maria languished at home, watched over by her children. Lucas lost sleep, skipped classes. Then one night he appeared at her window. He helped her out the back door like teenagers running away. They went to a bench in the empty square. There, under the stars, Maria told the truth she had been keeping. She was sick, advanced cancer. She had at most 6 months. The children knew, and that's why they watched her so closely. They thought Lucas would find out and run away, or worse, that he would convince a fragile woman to change her will. Lucas cried. He said that time didn't matter, that the months by her side were worth more than years of empty life, that she had taught him to truly feel. Maria also cried. She said that he had made her feel alive again, that he had reminded her what it was like to be seen, to be heard, to be desired not for her body, but for her essence. They decided to live those months fully. Secret meetings, hidden walks, letters when they couldn't see each other. Lucas read to her in the hospital room when the hospitalizations began. He held her hand during chemotherapy. Maria's children finally understood when they saw her smile for the first time in months. They saw how Lucas cared for her without asking for anything in return, how he was present in a way they themselves couldn't be. They apologized, too late for many, but still important. Maria died one autumn afternoon. Lucas was by her side. Her last words were that he had been the greatest gift of her last days. Love had no age, no rules. It only needed to be true. At the funeral, Lucas placed inexpensive flowers from the market on the coffin, the same kinds he brought on Saturdays. Maria's children found letters she had written. In them, the complete truth. Lucas never knew she had money. He thought she lived on a meager pension like his grandmother. He never asked for anything, never accepted anything. He loved for love's sake, pure and simple. The family realized they had misjudged him, that the young man had given their mother something money could never buy: true companionship, genuine interest, the feeling of being important to someone. Lucas kept her letters. He became a teacher as he had dreamed. Years later, he married someone his own age. He had children, but he never forgot Maria. He never forgot that the most improbable love of his life had also been the truest. And that society condemns what it doesn't understand, but the heart doesn't ask permission to feel. Years passed, and Lucas never told the whole story to anyone. He kept it a sacred secret. His wife knew he had lost someone important before he met her, but she didn't press him for details. He visited Maria's grave every year on the anniversary of her death. He brought the same inexpensive flowers. Maria's children went too. Over time, they developed a strange friendship with Lucas. They recognized in him a kindness they had been too blind to see. Maria's eldest daughter, Christina, sought out Lucas 5 years after her mother's death. She had something to give him, a box Maria had left instructions to deliver to him. Inside was an antique watch that had belonged to Maria's late husband, a photo of the two of them in the park, secretly taken by a friend of Maria's, and a final letter. In the letter, Maria explained that those months with Lucas had saved not only her last days but the entire memory of her life, that she had lived decades in a passionless marriage, raising children who loved her but didn't know her, existing without truly living. Lucas had arrived and shown her that there was still time, that there was still a possibility of true connection, that the final chapters could be the most intense. Maria wrote that she regretted nothing, that if she could go back she would do everything exactly the same, that the judgment of others was a small price to pay for the happiness they had shared. She asked Lucas not to carry guilt, to live fully, to love without fear of conventions. Lucas read and reread that letter until he memorized every word. He kept the photo in his wallet and wore the watch every day. His wife eventually asked about the watch. Lucas then told her the whole story. He expected judgment, jealousy perhaps. Instead, she cried. She said she loved him even more for having had the courage to love without boundaries, that the story made him more human, more complete. Years passed. Lucas became a beloved teacher. He had a special way of seeing people beyond appearances, of paying attention to the invisible, to the old, the young, the different. His children grew up hearing stories about respect and empathy. When Lucas was 40 years old, one of his students told him in secret. She was 73 and had fallen in love with a 29-year-old boy who frequented the same library. She was scared, ashamed. She thought she was going crazy. Lucas smiled. He told her story publicly for the first time. The student cried with relief. She said she felt less alone, less strange. Lucas realized that Maria's story needed to be told, that it could help others. He wrote a book. He changed the names but kept the essence, the truth of the feelings, the courage to love against all expectations. The book caused controversy. Half the readers thought it was beautiful, half thought it inappropriate. Lucas expected this. He knew the world wasn't ready to fully accept it yet, but some letters arrived, from older women in relationships with younger men, from older men with younger women, from people who loved outside the expected norms. They thanked him for giving voice to what they felt, for validating what they experienced. Christina, Maria's daughter, read the book and finally understood her mother completely. She realized how much time they had wasted judging instead of supporting, how much suffering they had caused in the last months of his mother's life. He started a support group for families dealing with unconventional relationships. He wanted to prevent others from making his mistakes. The group grew. Stories emerged, not just of age differences, but of all kinds of love that society tried to stifle. Lucas was sometimes invited to speak. He always ended up saying the same thing. Love doesn't need to make sense to others. You only need to make sense to the person you're living it with. Lucas's mother, whom he had so strongly condemned at the time, also changed. She grew old and became a widow. She understood the loneliness Maria must have felt. He apologized to his son even decades later. Lucas hugged her. He said that everyone did the best they could with the understanding they had. On his 60th birthday, Lucas returned to the market where it all began. It was renovated, modernized, but still there. He bought inexpensive flowers and went to Maria's grave. His wife went with him for the first time. They placed the flowers together. Lucas gave thanks silently, for Maria having had courage, for having taught him that life was too short to live for others. The regret of not having lived hurt more than any judgment. That night, Lucas dined with Maria's children. They had become true friends over the years. They toasted her memory, to the courageous woman who defied everything in her final months, who chose happiness over approval, who taught them all that love is love, regardless of age, appearance, or social expectations. Maria and Lucas's story became almost a legend in the city. Some romanticized it too much. Others still criticized it. But it changed conversations. It opened minds. It planted seeds of doubt in people's absolute certainties about how love should be. When Lucas was old, in the hospital, his grandchildren asked him what the most important love of his life had been. He looked at his wife of decades beside him. He smiled. He said he had been fortunate to have two great loves, One that lasted months and changed everything. Another that lasted decades and built everything. That he didn't need to choose. That his heart was big enough to honor both. Lucas died at 81 years old. In her pocket she had a photo of him and Maria. On her wrist, his watch. He was buried with both of them. His last wish. The family understood. At the funeral, people of all ages appeared. Unlikely couples who found courage in his story. Students who had learned to see beyond appearances. Families who had chosen support instead of judgment. The legacy wasn't just of one love. It was of all the loves he had helped validate. All the lives that changed because someone had the courage to love differently. To prove that the heart doesn't age. That feelings don't have an expiration date. That it's never too late to truly live. Maria and Lucas's story continued to be told. From generation to generation, some details changed. The essence remained. A reminder that the most unlikely love can be the most transformative. That 6 months of truth are worth more than decades of lies. That the courage to be happy is worth any price. And that in the end, when life is ending, no one regrets having loved too much, only having loved too little. Decades after Lucas's death, his great-granddaughter Sophia found the original manuscripts stored in the family attic. She was 23 years old and pursuing a master's degree in sociology. She decided to study the true story behind her great-grandfather's book. She interviewed everyone who was still alive. Christina, Maria's daughter, now 90 years old, recounted details that had never been published. How her mother shone when she spoke of Lucas. How she rejuvenated in his presence. How the medicines seemed to have a greater effect on the days he visited. Lucas's retired colleagues remembered how he defended marginalized students, how he created space for ignored voices, how his empathy came from having been judged, from having loved someone the world said he shouldn't love. Sophia discovered something even Lucas hadn't known. Maria had kept a diary during those last months. The family kept it as a relic. With permission, Sophia read it. The pages revealed a Maria even more passionate than Lucas's book had shown. She was writing about how his touch awakened skin she thought was dead, how their conversations nourished a mind she felt had nothing left to learn, how her desire for him was real, physical, overwhelming, even at 79. Maria wrote shamelessly about wanting to kiss him, about fantasizing about his youthful body, about feeling guilty for those thoughts, and then deciding not to feel that way anymore. About the freedom to admit she was still a woman with desires, not just an asexual grandmother as everyone treated her. The pages also revealed the pain, the fear of stealing his youth, the worry that he was there out of pity, the nights crying, thinking she was being selfish, but also the conscious decision to accept the happiness offered, to stop self-flagellation, to live. Sophia was deeply touched. He realized the story had layers no one had explored. The sexuality of older people, the age ableism that assumes older people can't love or desire, the infantilization of older adults. He turned everything into his master's thesis. It caused even more controversy than the original book. More conservative professors found it inappropriate. They said she was romanticizing something problematic. That age difference is always involved in imbalance of power. Sophia argued that the power imbalance lay in society, treating Maria as incapable of deciding about her own life, that the real violence was denying autonomy to a lucid adult woman. The dissertation went viral. Feminist groups were divided. Some said Sophia was right, that ageism was a form of misogyny, especially against older women. Others said she was ignoring real power dynamics. The debate was heated but necessary. It made people think, question assumptions. A television channel wanted to make a documentary. They interviewed Sophia, Christina, Lucas's widow, and his children. They found some of the couples who had written letters thanking Lucas. One of them was Ruth and Daniel. She was 72 when they met. He was 26. They had been together for 15 years now. Married. Happy. They faced stares every day but no longer cared. Another couple was Marcos and Helena. He was 80 and she was 38. They had met in an amateur astronomy group. Their passion for the stars had turned into a passion for each other. Her family had revolted. He had no living family. They lived alone, happy, isolated from judgment. The documentary showed that Maria and Lucas were not unique cases. that it happened more than people imagined, that love didn't follow the rules that society tried to impose, that each story was unique and deserved to be heard without assumptions. But it also showed the problematic cases, the relationships where there was real exploitation, where older men abused vulnerable young women, where wealthy women manipulated needy young men. The documentary didn't pretend everything was beautiful. It acknowledged the complexity, the need to protect the vulnerable without infantilizing the autonomous. Sophia became a researcher specializing in non-normative relationships. He traveled the world studying how different cultures dealt with unlikely loves. He encountered societies where age differences were celebrated, others where they were an absolute taboo. He realized that much of the judgment was cultural, not universal. He published books. He gave lectures. He always began by telling the story of his great-grandfather, the story that had changed his family, that had taught them to question certainties, to look beyond appearances, to defend the autonomy of people to make their own choices. In one of the lectures, an 85-year-old woman raised her hand. He said that she had spent her whole life denying herself happiness because she was afraid of what people would say. She had fallen in love with a man 30 years younger, but had run away from the feeling. Now he was dead, and she lived with regret. She cried, saying she wished she had had Maria's courage. Sophia hugged the woman afterward. She said it was never too late, that there was still time to live authentically, to stop asking the world for permission to exist. The woman smiled through tears. He said there were no more men, but there were other things. Journeys he had never taken, books I had never written, dreams shelved. It was about to begin. Maria's story had ignited something within her. Sophia then realized the true legacy. It wasn't about defending specific relationships. It was about defending each person's right to live fully, to make choices, to take risks, to prioritize happiness over approval, to live before it was too late. She returned to the city where Maria and Lucas had met. The old market had closed. In its place stood a modern building. But the square where they had met that night still existed. There was a small plaque now, posted by the city hall after the story became famous. It simply read, "Here love defied time." Sophia sat on the bench. She imagined her great-grandfather young and Maria old there. Two unlikely people finding connection, deciding that feelings mattered more than opinions, paying the price but reaping the rewards. She thought of how many people had passed through that square since then, how many had felt something forbidden and suffocated, how many had chosen safety over truth, how many had died without ever truly living. And she thought about how many, after learning the story, had chosen differently. They had taken a risk. They had loved. They had lived, even if only for a short time, even paying the price. Because in the end, Maria was right. The regret of not having lived hurt more than any judgment. Sophia wrote this in the new book she was preparing, a study on emotional legacies, how a love story could echo through generations, how one person's courage could inspire hundreds, how 6 months of authenticity could be worth more than a lifetime of conformity. The book would be dedicated to the memory of Maria and Lucas, to unlikely lovers everywhere, to those who chose to live despite everything, to those who proved that the heart has no expiration date, that feelings don't ask for permission, that love is love, always has been, always will be, and that the only life truly worth living is the one lived in truth. Sophia's book was published and reached the hands of people in similar situations around the world. A copy arrived at a nursing home in a small town. The librarian left it in the common room. Donna Beatriz, 87 years old, picked up the book by chance. She read it in 2 days. She couldn't stop. Beatriz had lived in the nursing home for 5 years. Her children had placed her there after her husband died. They said it was for her own good. She had become just another resident, another body waiting for the end. But there was a nurse in the nursing home. Chico, 32 years old, kind, attentive. In recent months, they had developed a friendship. He brought her books. They talked more than necessary. Beatriz felt something she was sure was dead, a tingling when he touched her hand, a pleasant anxiety waiting for his shift. She thought she was ridiculous, a senile old woman deluding herself. After reading about Maria, Beatrice understood that she wasn't alone, that what she felt was valid, real, human. She mustered her courage and invited Chico for coffee in town. He accepted immediately. They said they had things to talk about. At the cafe, away from the nursing home, the conversation flowed differently, deeper, more honest. Chico confessed that he also felt something, that he thought about her outside of work, that her intelligence, her sharp wit, her fascinating stories attracted him in a way he couldn't explain. Beatrice cried. She said she thought she was crazy, that a woman her age shouldn't feel these things. Chico held her hand on the table. He said that feelings have no age limit, that she was incredible and he felt lucky. They began a secret relationship, discreet meetings, messages on the cell phone that his granddaughter had given to Beatrice, stolen moments when he wasn't on duty. The nursing home management found out. They called Chico in. They threatened to fire him. They said it was unethical, that he was taking advantage of a vulnerable resident, that Beatrice's family would sue the institution. Chico defended himself. She said Beatrice was perfectly lucid, that she was autonomous, that the relationship was between two conscious adults. But the pressure was enormous. Beatrice knew about the meeting. She asked to speak with the director. She went to the office with the posture of someone who had been a school director for 40 years. She said she wasn't incapable, that she didn't need tutors to decide who to spend her time with, that if the institution had a problem with her having a love life, she would leave. The director was shocked. She hadn't expected that firmness. She tried to appease her. She said it was for her own good. Beatrice laughed bitterly. She said that for 5 years no one had worried about her well-being, that they had let her wither away, that now that she was happy they wanted to stop her. She called her children in front of the director. She said she wanted to leave the nursing home, that she was going to live alone again, or with Chico if he wanted, that she wouldn't ask for their opinion, she was just informing them. Her children tried to argue. Beatrice hung up. The story leaked to the local press. A young reporter found it fascinating. She wrote a story. The story went viral on social media. Half the people supported Beatrice. Half thought it was absurd. Sophia saw the news. She contacted Beatrice. They talked for hours. Beatrice told her everything. How the book had changed her perspective. How she had decided that the last years of her life would be lived on her own terms. Sophia asked permission to include the story in the next edition of the book. Beatrice agreed. She said that exposing herself was worthwhile if it helped other people. Chico was fired anyway, but he already had another job waiting for him. A hospital that saw the story and admired his integrity. Beatrice left the nursing home. She rented a small apartment. Chico moved in with her after 2 months. The family was scandalized. They threatened to have her declared legally incompetent, to take the case to court. Beatrice hired a lawyer. She underwent neurological exams that proved her full capacity. The judge denied the request for legal incapacitation. He said there was no legal basis to remove the autonomy of a mentally healthy woman. Beatrice's children distanced themselves. They said she was shaming the family, that he was selfish, that he didn't think about his grandchildren. Beatrice suffered but didn't back down. She said she had spent her whole life thinking about others, that she had the right to think about herself. She and Chico built a life together. Simple, but happy. He worked at the hospital. She finally wrote the memoir she had always postponed. They cooked together. They watched movies. They made love without haste, discovering that intimacy had no expiration date. The neighbors gossiped. Some were hostile. Others were curious. An elderly neighbor, Dona Irene, knocked on the door one day. She said she admired their courage, that she was tired of living for appearances. She asked if she could be a friend. A group formed. Older people who wanted to live authentically, who were tired of being treated like children, who wanted autonomy, dignity, respect. The group grew. They held meetings. They discussed the rights of the elderly, sexuality in old age-related ableism, personal liberation. Chico went sometimes. He listened. He learned. She realized that her relationship with Beatrice had opened her eyes to prejudices she didn't even know she had. 2 years later, Beatrice's children returned. They had reflected. They had seen how well their mother was doing. Happy, healthy. They apologized. Beatrice received them, not without hurt, but with a willingness to rebuild. They truly got to know Chico. They saw how he cared for her, how they cared for each other, what real love was like. The grandchildren, now teenagers, found it all very interesting. They asked unfiltered questions. Beatrice answered honestly. She spoke about feelings, about choices, about living without fear. One of the granddaughters said that her grandmother was punk. Beatrice laughed. She said it took her 87 years, but she had finally become punk. Beatrice and Chico's story was added to the growing archive of unlikely loves. Sophia continued documenting. Each story was unique, but they all had something in common. The courage to defy expectations, the cost of judgment, the reward of authenticity. Sophia gave a lecture at a university. A 24-year-old raised his hand. He said he was in love with a friend's grandmother. She was 73. He didn't know what to do. The audience fell silent. Sophia asked him to explain. The young man, Andre, recounted that he had met Elisa at an art exhibition. They talked for hours without him knowing her age. When he found out, he was already in love. They arranged other meetings. The connection deepened, but he was afraid of judgment, of hurting her, of being reckless. Sophia asked if he respected her, if he saw her as an equal, if there was manipulation or material interest. Andre said no, that he admired her deeply, that she challenged him intellectually, that she was the most interesting person he had ever met. Sophia then said that he needed to be honest with her, to have difficult conversations about expectations, about the future, about practical realities, but that if they were both conscious adults, if there was respect and honesty, they had the right to try. The audience was divided. Some applauded, others shook their heads in disapproval. Sophia was used to it. Her job wasn't to make everyone agree. It was meant to make everyone think. Andre sought out Sophia afterward. He thanked her. He said he would talk to Elisa. Months later, Sophia received an email. Andre and Elisa were together, facing difficulties, stares, comments, but happy. He thanked her for giving them courage. He said he had read everything about Maria and Lucas, that their story was a beacon. Sophia replied, saying that the courage was theirs, that she was only documenting it, that the true heroes were the people living their truths every day. She saved the email in a special folder. She was building an archive for future researchers, evidence that love took forms that social norms tried to deny, proof that humanity was more complex than the boxes allowed. One night, alone in her office, Sophia looked at the photo of her great-grandfather that she kept on her desk, young Lucas smiling. She thanked him silently, for him having had courage, for Maria having had courage, for them having left a legacy that went beyond them, a legacy of freedom, of authenticity, of love without borders. Sophia knew that the work would never be finished, that there would always be more stories, more unlikely loves, more people needing validation. But she was ready. She would carry forward the torch that her great-grandfather had lit, that Maria had nurtured, that generations now carried, the torch that illuminated the path for those brave enough to love beyond the rules, to live beyond expectations, to exist fully before it was too late. Sophia was 52 years old when she decided it was time to end her research, not because the topic was exhausted, but because she had documented enough, she had lived enough, and above all, she had learned enough. Her last act as a researcher would be to return to the beginning, organizing everything into a permanent archive that would be kept in a public library, free for anyone who needed it. She spent months cataloging stories, hundreds of them, each one unique, each one important. Maria and Lucas opening up, Beatrice and Chico, Andre and Elisa, Ruth and Daniel, dozens of other names, other lives, other loves that refused to die quietly. On the day she finished, Sophia went to the cemetery. She first visited Maria's grave. She left flowers, the same cheap flowers that Lucas always carried. She thanked a woman she never met but who had changed her entire family. Then she went to her great-grandfather's grave. She was beside her great-grandmother, as it should be. Lucas had loved them both in different but equally true ways. Sophia placed her hand on the cold tombstone. He said aloud that the work was finished, that their story had helped hundreds, perhaps thousands, that the legacy was safe. He felt a strange peace, as if a cycle were closing, On the way home, he stopped in the square. The plaque was still there. Here, love defied time. A young couple was sitting on a bench. They had just kissed. Sophia smiled. Life going on. Love going on. As it always was. As it always would be. At home, he opened his computer one last time. He wrote the conclusion of the file. The words flowed. This is the story of Maria and Lucas, but it is also the story of all of us, of every person you have ever loved against the odds, of every heart that beat faster when reason told it to stop, of every courageous choice of happiness over approval. Maria was 79 years old. Lucas was 22. The numbers don't matter. What matters is that two human beings met. They recognized each other. They chose each other. And for 6 months, they lived more fully than many live in decades. The world judged them, as it always does. But they had something the world couldn't take away. Truth, connection, genuine love without masks. Lucas lived 59 more years after Maria died. You built a beautiful family. You were happy, but you never forgot. You never denied. You never apologized. You carried those 6 months like a treasure, as proof that he had been brave once, that he had loved without asking permission. Generations later, we are still learning from them. We are still finding courage in their story. We are still understanding that the rules about how to love are made by people. And people can be wrong. Love has no formula. It has no right age. It has no expected appearance. It has no expiration date. Love simply is. And when it is true, when it is respectful, when it is between capable adults, it deserves to exist. It deserves to be celebrated. It deserves to be lived. This is not a story about defending specific relationships. It is a story about defending each person's right to live authentically, to make choices, to take risks, to be happy on their own terms. Maria could have said no. You could have lived your last months in safety, without scandal, no pain, but also no joy, no surprise, no feeling alive. She chose differently, and that choice resonated. You changed your family. You changed Lucas. You changed everyone who heard the story. You inspired Beatrice to leave the nursing home. You gave Andre the courage to be honest. You helped hundreds validate their own feelings. A 6-month love, an unlikely couple, a courageous choice, and the world changed a little. It became a little more open, a little kinder, a little more human. This is the true legacy. Not the details of the story, not the numbers or the circumstances, but the permanent reminder that it's worth being brave, that it's worth taking risks, that life is too short to live by other people's rules. Maria used to say that the regret of not having lived hurt more than any judgment. She was right. How many people reach the end of their lives wishing they had risked more, loved more, lived more authentically? How many die with songs not sung, dances not danced, loves not lived? Not Maria, not Lucas, and all those who were inspired by them too. This file remains as a testament, as evidence, as encouragement, for the next person who feels something improbable, for the next heart that beats out of rhythm, for the next soul brave enough to choose happiness over approval. You are not alone. Maria and Lucas came before, hundreds came after, and hundreds will come after you. Love always finds a way. It always has. It always will. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary, because it's human, because it's real. May this story continue to echo. May you continue to inspire. May you continue to remind us all that life is meant to be lived, fully, courageously, authentically, before it's too late. With love and gratitude to Maria, to Lucas, and to all the unlikely lovers who had the courage to exist. Sophia saved the document, closed the computer, went to the balcony. The sun was setting, orange and pink painting the sky. She thought of all the stories she had collected, all the lives she had touched, all the love she had witnessed, and she realized that she herself had changed. She had learned to live with less fear, to judge with less haste, to love with more freedom. Maria and Lucas's legacy wasn't just in others, it was in her too. That night, Sophia had dinner with her family, children, grandchildren, her elderly mother. She told stories of her great-grandfather that they already knew but never tired of hearing. The youngest granddaughter, at 8 years old, asked if it was true that love could happen with anyone. Sophia smiled. She said yes, that the heart didn't follow rules, that the important thing was to be kind, to be honest, to be courageous. The girl seemed satisfied. She went back to drawing. Sophia looked around the table. 4 generations, all touched by the story, all carrying the lesson. Love is worthwhile. Always. The next morning, Sophia woke up and didn't think about the file anymore. It was complete, delivered. Her part was done. She went for a walk. She passed through the square. An elderly man was on a bench reading. A young woman sat down next to him. They started talking. Sophia didn't stay to see the rest. It wasn't necessary. Life went on. Love continued. New stories were being written every day. And somewhere, in the beyond or in the wind or in collective memory, Maria and Lucas smiled. They had planted a seed, and it had become a forest of courage, of love, of lives lived fully, and that was more than enough. It was everything. The sun shone, life went on, and love, always love, continued to defy time.